I like challenges. I know I can get a full-time job if I really want to, but I don't know if I can get a user, or I can get 10 users, or I can get $1 million in revenue. I think learning is really just like putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. What we're doing right now is just going after the disruptors. We're making the startups that are eating these big companies faster. Then they're talking to the people that made these disruptors faster. They're asking, how do we get in on this? The biggest lesson is just build things and throw them away if they don't work. It's easy to make things and keep them around. It's much harder to admit failure and throw them out.
Welcome to the Generation Hustle Podcast, a show that explores the world of business, entrepreneurship, and culture, all centered around the millennial. I'm your co-host Sherison alongside my good friend Almin, and this week we're speaking in code. Episode 40 is with Colin Chartier, co-founder and CEO of LayerCI. LayerCI is a DevOps platform for distributed software teams. Their web application enables the highest performing software developers to preview full stack environments for every commit and have a centralized CI and CD stack. Deciding against the typical path of graduates heading to big tech firms, Colin decided to build a business of his own with co-founder Lyn Chen in Toronto to help developers ship code faster. Last year, LayerCI raised a pre-seed round from Y Combinator, followed by over $1 million in investment from multiple Silicon Valley firms. So we sit down with Colin to learn how LayerCI is helping businesses in simple terms, no engineering knowledge needed. He breaks down how you can accelerate your ability to learn, the process of being chosen by Y Combinator, and the skills that students and young entrepreneurs in this field should focus on today. This was a really insightful conversation that we hope you enjoy.
So let's just get right into it. So we know LayerCI is, quite a new startup. It's still growing as a team. And, as a startup, there are several challenges that, you face when it comes to growing your business. So first thing I wanted to ask you is, can you help us understand like how your team prioritizes key tasks and, how do you meet like kind of your product roadmap deliverables, but also like your sales targets at the same time?
Sure. So like to directly answer the question, basically everything we do is informed from the support team and the sales team. So I guess the two very valuable classes of features are the ones that stop churn and increase conversion. Mm-hmm. So like we don't put anything on the product roadmap that doesn't solve one of those two these days. But like, long term, you have to care about code quality and maintainability and things like that. So in at least the stage of the company we're right now, we're just trying to build out things that people need urgently.
That's awesome. And in terms of like how you guys are kind of like working as a team in unison, like how do you prioritize tasks in that sense? Like you and Lyn working together, making sure, hey, we have an investor meeting or we have, something along the lines of a sales call or so, how do you guys manage that?
I mean, we ruthlessly cut things like investor meetings, like anything that's not like they make you feel good, but they're not actually moving the needle. So most of the work to be done is like calls with customers. Like Lyn is in charge of that section of things. Like as COO, she does the leading the sales team, like getting the lead generation people to find prospective customers. She works with our salespeople to get calls with those customers and to close them. I guess I'm CEO, and my primary high level goals are just get the product to facilitate sales, make things that our current customers need. So the support staff are under me personally. And I think that's probably the best way to do things. You want the support staff to talk to the engineers as much as possible because
for sure,
that's an important bridge to have.
Right. And so as you kind of grow LayerCI, what's your hiring philosophy? And like as a young stage company, how are you guys attracting talent? Because, attracting talent's tough, but as a smaller company, it's even harder.
Yeah. Hiring philosophy, like Lyn and I have mostly agreed that we just want to find people with a good baseline. So people with strong foundational skills that we can train up to whatever we need them to be. So like I'd much rather hire someone that has less total years of experience, but is more interested in leveling up than someone that has a lot of years of experience, but will only do what they're comfortable with.
Right.
Because one will get you there in a 1-year time scale, but one will get you there in a 5-year time scale. And we're not thinking on 1-year time scales.
That's awesome. And then when we talk about credibility for a young company, how important is that to kind of establish? And, what's your team's approach when it comes to, potentially selling into a larger organization because, there might be some competitors that you're kind of dealing with and might be more established. So what's your approach when it relates to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, credibility in our field, like B2B software sales, basically just means whether you have SOC 2, which is like an accounting accreditation, and we're getting that, so check mark achieved. But to get into larger organizations, I think it's almost the wrong idea to push into them. Like, you don't want to go to an organization and say, like, here's why you need what we need, because that's when you have the year-long sales cycle. That's when you have the chain of decision makers, and you don't have a vendor number. Like, they can just add as many gates as they want, and you'll never end up closing the sale in a reasonable timescale. So what we're doing right now is just going after the disruptors. Like, we're making the startups that are eating these big companies faster, and then when in a couple of years the big companies will look back and say, like, how come these, like, a big bank would say, like, how come Stripe is doing so well, or how come Robinhood is eating our fintech division, or like automakers would say, why is Tesla eating stuff? And it all has to do with velocity. So we go for the disruptors, and then the incumbents have to prioritize kind of on the back of it, and then it's a pull, right? Then they're talking to the people that made these disruptors faster, and they're asking, how do we get in on this?
Right. No, I think that's a beautiful philosophy, because like there's so many times where I've experienced like a young startup trying to sell into a large organization, and then they realize, oh shit, we don't have the resource capacity. Oh shit, we don't have this or that. And then when you're already pulled into it, then you realize, man, there's a lot of like bureaucracy when it comes to these large organizations to make a decision, and you just get stalled on a lot of your kind of deliverables. So I think you guys are onto like the right mindset of joining the disruptors to, establish yourselves within the market. So when it comes to your co-founder, Lyn, what have you kind of learned from working with each other? She has more of a, I guess I would say, a business background versus your technical background. So how do you kind of work in unison, and what have you learned from working with each other?
I mean, I think we got lucky in that we have super complementary skills. I think early stage startups really just need someone constantly cranking out product, and that has like product vision, and someone, getting rejected 900 times to get the first sale. So that was really the founding dynamic. Like, a year ago when we were first starting out, Lyn would take what I said as truth about the space and like the tech side of things and what engineers need. And I would be amazed at her ability to get rejected so many times just to get the one success. And over time, it's gotten easier, but I think it's been very complimentary in that I've learned a lot about sales and operations from her, like, reminders and making sure payroll is run on time and all of the nitty gritty that takes scaling a company. And I'd like to think she's learned a lot about tech and engineers and hiring, that sort of area for me.
That's awesome. And what would you say is kind of the most rewarding part of this journey thus far for you?
I mean, like, the whole reason I got into entrepreneurship versus, going to FANG or whatever was I like people actually using the stuff. So like, it's easy to go to, I mean, it's not easy, but you can go to Google or whatever and crank out some ad optimizations that increase ad conversion rate by 0.1% or whatever. And I'm sure there's lots of engineers that have essentially that job description at Google. But what I find really rewarding about LayerCI and entrepreneurship in general is making things that people are actively using and like actively giving you feedback on and iterating with like actual users. So like our customers, I have a shared Slack channel with lots of them, and they say like, oh, it would be cool if it would do this. And then it's like, oh yeah, that does sound reasonable. Let me just make that for you. And then the same day it's released. And then they're like, wow, this is amazing. This solves all of our problems. So it's like, I think the most rewarding thing is just getting people to use what you make in a timely manner instead of doing quarterly sprint cycles. And
no, that's awesome.
I think that's a great kind of segue into a little bit about your personal background. We wanted to understand, like, what about engineering and math kind of appeal to you? Like, what gravitated you towards that field?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I guess, similar sorts of motivations. As a kid, I was lucky to learn programming like really young, like 11 or something. And I used to make game mods. So
Okay.
I made some popular mods like Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2 and Minecraft. And like that was just really rewarding. Like making something that like 10,000 users would use. Like there's, you stumble upon a YouTube video with 100,000 views, like reviewing a map you made or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just very rewarding. Like seeing people actually enjoy the things you make. And I think that's what got me hooked on the entrepreneurship grind really early on.
For sure. Yeah. So how did you learn how to code? You said you started learning at 11?
Yeah, it was just like, game tutorials. Warcraft had this really atrocious language called JAS.
Okay.
And it was almost the perfect ramp to programming because it had memory leaks and things. So your maps would get slower over time. If you wanted a map that lasted longer than an hour, you had to learn about like memory management.
Right.
But you didn't know it was called that. You just like followed the tutorials on like how to free things after you're done using them. So like at an early age, I got to see all of that like inner workings, and it was a nice sandbox too because you didn't have to worry about compiler chains or whatever. It's like if you could run Warcraft itself, you could run this map editor.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting into Java through Minecraft, and then I learned all sorts of other programming languages in the meantime. I mean, I'm sure lots of people get started in building stuff from gaming.
Yeah, especially more so now than past years. But and that's a great point. Like we wanted to understand something else about you. Like what is your approach to kind of learning? Especially, I mean, maybe we can kind of take it twofold, like how you kind of manage your workload in terms of learning through school and now being a founder as well. Because obviously from the school standpoint, we were talking about this earlier, you have a triple major, which is something that's very intimidating to people. So like, can you kind of break that down into twofold from the school aspect and now as a founder as well? What is your approach to learning?
Well, I don't know if I'd consider a triple major learning, because like that's just the stamp of the university that I've done the things. I guess the better question is like, why did I do math and stats in the first place when I started in computer science? And it's just because like I like challenges. Like I think a large part, I guess, on top of building things that people want, I just like things that I don't already know. So for example, like starting a startup, like I'd worked the CTO of someone else's startup, but I didn't know if I could do it myself.
Right.
And it's like, why not try? Like I know I can get a full-time job if I really want to, but I don't know if I can get a user, or I can get 10 users, or I can get $1 million in revenue. So it's interesting just to do things that challenge you. I don't know why. Maybe it's like a personal quirk. But I think learning is really just like putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, like doing a major that you didn't expect.
Yeah.
Or trying to do a major. It's like, why not? What do you have to lose?
It's almost like you took a chance then with the major. You kind of just like, let's just give it a try and see how this goes.
Yeah. I mean, like statistics, I did like a machine learning thing.
Right.
Okay.
It's like machine learning is kind of tangentially related to programming. So, and U of T, the university I went to, had really world-class professors in it. So I figured it's hard to go wrong if you're learning from the university that has Hinton.
Yeah. 100%.
Hinton is a neural network practitioner.
Yeah, for sure. So your educational background is there, and obviously you kind of taught yourself a lot of things, it seems like, along the way to where you are today. But now as a founder who has to wear a lot of hats, like has your approach changed at all into how you approach new learnings or how you kind of interact with the teams or anything like that?
I mean, the hard part of being a founder is finding time to learn, right? Like in university, it's easy just like nose to the grindstone, like read all sorts of stuff, like look at Hacker News, look at Reddit, learn like all these new like NFTs.
Yeah.
But like as a founder, you really need to seek it out, and you need to set personal time. So I guess my personal strategy to that is I don't work on Saturdays usually.
Yeah.
Like Saturday is just like this Saturday I went to the beach in Toronto. It's
Nice.
it was the first nice day that you could go to the beach. So I went and read a bit. But I think it is a cognizant thing. Like you need to keep like focusing on upgrading, because otherwise the world will move on and then you'll be stuck in your startup from 10 years ago, wondering where you got passed by.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe a fun question here is, what are your thoughts on listening to like a lot of these founders saying you have to read a book a week kind of thing and stuff like that? What's your philosophy on that kind of stuff?
I mean, I think it's broadly correct. Like you have to read like a book or book equivalent a week. So like in my field of work, a lot of the things I read don't really come in book form. Like, there's entrepreneurship books like 0 to 1 or Bad Blood or whatever, which I would recommend, of course. Those are fun to read. But no one's reading like 0 to 1 per week. I think when people say they're reading a book a week, it's often like reading journals or reading magazines or reading papers. I enjoy, there's a YouTube channel called like Minute Papers or something, 2-minute papers. And that, I'd count that in the read a book a week thing, where you're like seeing the cutting edge. And like, if you're curious about a topic or you're curious how something went, you can actually read the white paper. And it's like, you're not exactly reading a book a week, but you're consuming lots of new knowledge to stay up to date in things.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great way. I think, that's like a easier way to kind of consume knowledge. Obviously, another one is with podcasts and audiobooks. That's been kind of my go-to, because I just can't sit and read a book for that long. Like, I need to hear it. But yeah, to that point, it's like, obviously you mentioned that as well. Like, it's hard to find the time to learn as a founder as well. And I just want to confirm here: are you working while talking to us?
I mean, there is a support window open in the next monitor. I guess I'm monitoring other people working.
Fair enough. So kind of along that line of thought, what kind of skills would you kind of maybe single out to the students and young entrepreneurs right now looking to come into this field? Like, what would you say we should focus on in terms of the skill that they need to be developing to get to where they want to be?
I guess this ties back into my previous answers, but fundamentals. You don't need to know anything in particular, just like how computers, like if you're doing a SaaS business, for example, you have to know how like HTTP works. You have to know how, like at a very high level, like content delivery networks work, and like all of these building blocks that you'll be using.
Right.
Because you can throw something in Netlify and get a SaaS, but if you don't know how it actually works, you're going to be very hamstrung as you scale. Because like you're not going to know why things are falling apart. Like you won't even have the conceptual understanding. So that's on the tech side. And on the business side, I mean, I think it's important to have an idea that like resonates with you as a founder. Like LayerCI is something that I like was on my idea list because I'd faced it before, like as CTO of another startup, which is a unique experience. I was like struggling with this specific thing, and I thought, oh well, there's probably a lot of businesses that need this specific thing, so might as well make a startup out of it. But I think like a lot of people just like, pin on the dartboard, choose a company idea.
Yeah.
And those almost always fail. Like in Toronto, the two most common startups, I guess there's like 3 common classes of startups because it's Toronto. It's like real estate, because real estate. There's like restaurants, because like everyone loves eating.
Right.
And there's like universities, because like, oh, I just graduated and university's broken. But those 3 fields are like super saturated. And unless you're like a restaurateur with 10 years of experience, it's really unlikely you're going to bring something new to that industry, right?
Right.
Whereas like the Flexport is a super successful business, but like nobody really understands what they do, because like Flexport does like logistics, and one of the co-founders of Flexport had like a logistics background or something.
Right.
So I think the goal is like find people that have these unique experiences that can seed big companies, and not just do the easy ones that you understand.
Right. I think en masse, it's easy to rush into the easier problems, and that's where we have the saturated startups, especially with Toronto. I'm definitely with you on that. But outside of that, like, would you touch on any soft skills?
I mean, like, I think there's lots of like leadership styles. Like you don't need to be a Steve Jobs to be successful. In fact, there's like lots of founders you can think of that are the antithesis of Steve Jobs that are successful.
Right.
You don't need to be like a Justin Kahn. You just need to have like a certain set of skills, and you need to be able to pitch the vision. Like the only soft skill that matters is getting everyone aligned. Like you just need to like ruthlessly make sure everyone remembers every week what the company's doing. Like what is the vision of the company?
Right.
And if people forget that, then everything just falls apart and it becomes a confused mess. And people forget very quickly. Like you probably don't remember what you were doing this time last week.
Yeah, I
like
don't.
At this exact hour. Because like people don't, like even on week chunks, people forget about things. Or like if you spend like 10 weeks away from a friend, you feel like you haven't seen that friend in forever.
Right.
So like it's really important that like on a week by week basis, like the meeting I had right before this one was an all hands meeting. And like the start of the all hands meeting is always like, this is what the company's doing. This is what the different teams are doing in furtherance of that vision. And it might sound repetitive to do that every week, but it's super important, because otherwise people forget, and they forget, I guess, faster than you realize.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, because we do Monday morning syncs as well, just to talk about what we did last week, what's coming up and all that. So for a startup, especially with things moving so quickly, I think that's really important. So, you guys got a great philosophy around that. And I think that brings us to a perfect segue on terms of you mentioning that, LayerCI was kind of founded from a personal problem that was apparent while you were working at a different company as a CTO. So can you kind of describe to us what problem LayerCI solves? And, for us that don't understand, say, the code or development lingo, can you kind of almost put it in, say, layman terms?
Sure. So I guess the big concept is that like full stack websites, like ones you can interact with, they run on servers, generally. So like if you make a change to something, like say you're making a pizza website, like you can order pizza online. There's stuff that the user has to enter, right? They have to like make a cart. They have to like press the purchase button. There's like interactions they have to make. And if developers are making changes to things, it's easy to break in subtle ways certain workflows. So if you change like the Google login button to be a newer version of Google login, like 3 steps down, that can cause the when you press buy pizza, it just spins forever.
Oh, okay.
For example. So it's really important to be able to, after every change a developer proposes, spin up everything and then like automatically work through like common workflows. That's called an end-to-end test. So we help companies like basically spin up everything very quickly. So like a developer on the team says, I'd like to make this change to the Google login button. But the second they propose the change, like automatically in the background, a bunch of copies of the application get started. And each of those copies, like some of them are sent to QA people to review. Some of them are like automatically running these tests, like testing common workflows. And some of them are just evaluating that the code looks good. So that's I get at a high level, that's what CI is.
That made more sense to me.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you've been in the your company's been I think it's a little over a year now that you guys have been operational, correct?
Well, I mean, the first line of code was like August 2019, so it's been maybe 18 months.
Okay, awesome. And so, you've had some time to kind of scale the business. You've gone through YC also. What are your clients kind of telling you about your platform today? And, what's the feedback been like? And, how are you prioritizing? Like, we always get into that mindset, like the customer is always right, but sometimes that isn't the case. So like, how you adjust yourself in terms of getting that direct feedback from clients?
I mean, I think there's lots of people that have tried to make systematic ways of like gathering feedback, like, putting in a customer story, Scrum backlog, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't really work for like a small company. Like in the early days, it was just me and Lyn. So like, obviously I'm not going to make a Scrum backlog just for me to take tickets off of.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the product skill you need a founder to have product skill early on. It's usually the developer. And the product skill is taking the feedback and finding like the high level kind of stories that users want. Because user feedback almost always comes in the form of like, I would like a button that,
right.
And if you accept all of that user feedback, you end up with an interface with like 1,000 buttons, and then no one can do anything with it because there's no cohesive workflow. Like everything is just buttons. So I guess a good example is the ephemeral environment feature, which is like a user basically said, we want QA people to be able to interact with these environments. We're going to glue together what you're doing with another tool called ngrok, and then set like a timeout. We'd like to increase the timeout of the environment so that it doesn't expire as quickly. And then our QA people will be able to dig around with things manually instead of having automatic workflows. It'll be like an actual person clicking through the screens and trying to press the buy pizza button or whatever.
Right.
I heard this and I thought wow, we could actually make a feature that's this. It's not going to be a button to extend the length of the timeout. It's going to be a button that gives you one of these environments. Like when you click a button, it just wakes up the snapshot of how things were before and then gives you an environment. Right. So that wasn't an actual feature that someone requested. It was like a asterisk to a feature someone requested. But that's ended up being one of our biggest selling points. A lot of the reason people convert to us, the burning need is these per change environments for their QA people. And if we had just made the button to extend the timeout, we wouldn't have gotten all of those sales. So it ends up being a lot of take the feedback and find a cohesive vision that fits in with your existing tool for it.
Just out of curiosity, do you have an idea of what industry most of your clients kind of come from in terms of when they ask for this kind of help?
I mean, it's not super industry specific. I mean, it's generally B2B.
Right.
So like we have customers that do like education platforms. We have customers that do like cloud optimization. We have customers that do like accounting software.
Okay.
We have like apps. Just it's not super industry specific. It's like think about what sorts of companies have a website that you interact with. That's kind of our customer profile.
Yeah, for sure. And I was just going off of the pizza example. I wasn't sure if like you maybe you dealt with more like restaurant type companies or retail. You know what I mean? That's what I was trying to get at. But yeah.
That was maybe a contrived example because nobody actually codes their own website for pizza. You just use Shopify.
Right.
So like maybe eventually Shopify would be our customer, but like a pizza company doesn't have developers really. They just use an existing platform.
Right. Maybe that explains it because your example is spot on. I've tried to use pizza websites a lot and their order thing just breaks down. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go to Uber Eats at the end of the day.
But they lose revenue, right? It's like there's immediate monetary value to that because they see that they've lost, like a customer bounced at the checkout page. And they're like, how did this happen? They use Sentry, another DevOps tool to find the bug. And then they want to like have their developers test things on every change.
Just taking a step back here. So LayerCI was actually selected as one of the few that made it through Combinator, which is, huge. It's a huge accomplishment. So can you talk to us about that? What that kind of process looked like? Obviously, the experience of building a business inside an accelerator is very unique. Can you talk to that and what that process looked like?
Yeah. I mean, remote YC, like we did the first remote batch. So we're still getting
very
the ground
unique.
running.
Okay, yeah.
I think like YC's whole thing is basically accountability. Like they try to keep you accountable to metrics. It was maybe less of a big deal for us because we were already kind of doing that when we entered, which was maybe part of the reason they accepted us.
Yeah.
But it's like, you have weekly calls with your partners. Like we had like the product officer of Yahoo, the former product officer of Yahoo is one of our group partners. We had a founder of Twitch.
Okay.
So like the group partners are like very high level, like very experienced, like successful entrepreneurs.
Right.
And so like you have to go to these three people and say like, this is what I did last week. And then I guess the accelerating part of that is like, if you're doing nonsense, they'll shame you in front of like 20 other people.
Yeah.
And so you learn very quickly not to do stupid things like, working on random feel-good things instead of actually talking to customers.
Can you share one of those experiences where you got kind of put on blast?
We maybe didn't get put on blast a huge amount. There was people that did. Like I guess one specific example is we made a top of funnel tool that was like tangentially related to what we're doing called Show Layer. Okay. And it was like you take the ephemeral environment feature that like lets you like the thing that QA people can see a change, and you just like make a dribble for developers with that. So like you push changes, you get like a view of the change you made, and it's like a public gallery, so other people can play with it and see like the software you built. And the group partners basically said like, this is a waste of time. Like stop making two products at once.
Yeah.
And they were right. Like that. There's no way we could sell both of the products at once.
Right.
But it was an interesting idea. I mean, it definitely wasn't worth it to make it, but as an eventual thing for us to do for top of funnel, it might be worth it as an intern project.
Can you speak to kind of what your selling point was from the LayerCI perspective? And I know you already mentioned that you guys were on top of your metrics, and that was obviously appealing to them. But outside of that, like, what was your kind of approach to standing out? And essentially, we want to understand how can an applicant stand out during this process?
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, more of an art than a science. Like, YC doesn't have a rubric, of course. There's just, like, ratings by the internal group project partners. I think one of the big reasons we got in is that we had a bunch of recommendations. Like, we basically talked to every YC company that was, like, in Toronto or in Canada or in developer tools, and got them to like give us feedback and then refer us if they thought we had a good idea.
Right.
And we had customers. So it's like we didn't go into this having like no revenue and no proof that someone wanted what we were building. We had, a good founder dynamic, like a builder and a seller. We had a customer that was a YC company.
Okay.
And we had, like, I guess, general good metrics and a clear product vision. But I mean, there's, I guess my personal opinion is there's 3 ways to get into YC. Impressive credentials. So like YC loves Stanford students and Zooglers, ex-Googlers. It's like those, you see lots of those people that have like very not fleshed out companies with no customers that still get into YC, because I guess the assumption is if you've worked at Google for 5 years or whatever, you probably have the skills to figure it out.
Right.
I don't know how true that is, but I mean, YC seems to like them.
Okay.
There's people with like lots of expertise. Like there's like MIT PhDs in vision, making vision companies or whatever.
Right.
Like actual like eyeglass, like eye strain stuff. Those people get in pretty often because like they have the subject matter expertise and the credentials to make this like super niche thing, which I guess goes back to my original point of like make things that you as a founder are like uniquely suited to.
Right.
And then there's just like traction. So it's like having customers, having LOIs, having some form of revenue, like having lots of user signups. It's pretty hard to get into YC if you don't have any of those 3. Like
Right.
if you're making an app for restaurateurs and you got a few restaurants using it but not paying you,
Yeah.
and neither of the founders are restaurateurs and both of the founders are new grads, it's like that's maybe a typical company in Toronto, but it doesn't like, you know, YC is going to think like, what do these people have that's going to make this $1 billion company?
I mean, tell us how you really feel about Toronto startups, man. That's like the 3rd shot you've taken this whole conversation.
They're getting better. I mean, it's just like I did startup school, like the YC startup school thing, and I was just really jaded by the it would be geographically matched, and like basically 3/4 of the companies were either in like banking, real estate, or restaurants.
Yeah.
And I was like, it feels like there's more restaurant startups in Toronto than restaurants.
Yeah, especially now. So
Yeah.
So maybe not a shot at like startups in general, but just like I think founders in Toronto don't have the Silicon Valley like exposure to many different fields, so they always choose like one of 3, and then they inevitably fail because like the markets are super saturated. Versus like LayerCI is, I guess, very successful in terms of Toronto startups, but we're making developer tools, which is super rare. Or like Shopify is making like merchant solutions.
Yeah.
Which is like, I don't know, there's not many people are saying like, let's make Shopify.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they should though. Like if you aim more ambitious, you end up being more successful.
For sure. And do you guys plan on staying within Toronto for the long term, right?
I mean, probably engineering wise, we'll have like a remote team in Canada. We're probably inevitably going to have a sales office in the Valley because
Right. Just makes sense.
Most of the money is.
Yeah.
Just to kind of tie out the conversation on Y Combinator, can you speak to any of like your best lessons that you took out of that journey, whether that's personally that you've applied to your life or into LayerCI?
Probably the biggest lesson is just build things and throw them away if they don't work. Like it's easy to make things and keep them around. It's much harder to like admit failure and throw them out. So if you have like a button in your interface that no one uses, I guess this goes back to my point of like, if you have an interface with 10 buttons, it's like, it's going to hurt your conversion a lot, even if you don't know why it's hurting your conversion. If you have an interface with like 2 buttons, then people will just feel less intimidated and more welcomed by your tool. So like our like main dashboard has basically 2 things you can click in the onboarding tutorial. And like that helped conversion a lot. Or the Dribble thing. Like we made a top of funnel thing, Dribble for software developers. We made it like 3 days of work. We launched it on Product Hunt and Show Hacker News. We got like 10,000 page views. Everything died out. Like the next week, it had like essentially 0 page views, and then we just deleted it. Like we just like we removed all references to it from the main landing page. Right. So I mean, it's like you just don't want to distract people with many of these paths they can take. You want to have a few very core ones.
So build fast and trash it if it's not working.
Or even if it's not working as well as you'd like. Like there's lots of mediocre things you can make that someone likes. But that single workflow, like say you make a feature that's used by one customer. This is again something. We had an artifact directive that let you make files that could be downloaded. We had a customer in the early days that requested it. We made it. And then that customer like didn't end up using it for much. Like they were just using it for like some build logs or something. I basically like told them a workaround and then deleted the directive.
Yeah.
Because I didn't delete it, but I removed it from the docs so people wouldn't get distracted by it. Because if you keep these things around, then people use them for all sorts of weird things, and it
Right.
dramatically increases your support burden.
Right.
Because, for example, we have to like delete these files. Like, what if the drives are filling up, or like we have to put it in cloud storage, and then there's like latency issues, and it's just easier to disable it and then not deal with scaling that feature that might not be providing much value.
Right. Right.
That kind of wraps up like the bulk of the content that we wanted to understand about what LayerCI is doing and kind of where you're headed. We like to wrap up our conversations with a lightning round where we kind of toss really quick questions at you just to get fast responses and get a bit deeper understanding of who you are.
The first question here, favorite book of all time?
I'm going to say Bad Blood. I think it's topical and it's very entertaining.
Okay.
It's
awesome.
on the bookshelf behind me.
Oh, no way. Okay,
Ooh,
cool.
Okay, all right, awesome.
Has a little collection soon to be like a bookshelf. That's how usually the founder's way goes. If you could choose one person to have dinner with, dead or alive, who would that be?
Ooh, since it's dead or alive, I'm going to go with John von Neumann.
Okay, who's that?
You're going to have to give us some context for that one.
He, if you look at his Wikipedia page in the known for section, it's like it doesn't fit. Like there's like a separate page for known for.
Okay.
But for computer science, he invented merge sort. He invented like the plate that's used in atomic bombs for like reflecting the blast energy.
Wow.
He was an early pioneer in algorithms. He basically just like pioneered 3 different fields. I'm sure he invented a self-replicating machines with von Neumann automata.
Wow.
Okay.
Lots of lots of cool stuff if you look at his Wikipedia page. But
yeah, definitely going to take a look for that now. Outside of LayerCI, what company excites you the most?
Definitely nothing from Toronto.
I mean, like there's lots of cool companies in Toronto. Like I guess the ones that did make it are all pretty cool. Like Flip or Uber Flip.
Yeah.
But there's just not that many of them, which I guess was the original jab I was making. I think the coolest company I've seen recently. YC alumni get to go to YC's like demo day.
Right.
So it's like the next generation of companies in YC. I got to see all of their pitches a couple weeks ago, and the one I really liked was like self-driving street sweepers.
Wow.
It was like instead of robo taxis, it was robo sweepers.
Okay.
And I just really like the idea because it basically it's on the profitable path to self-driving cars, but it solves so many of the problems. Like street sweepers go slowly, they go overnight, so there's not that much traffic. They're super loud. Like it would be very difficult to get hit by a street sweeper because you can hear them coming from like a block away.
Yeah.
And even if you do get hit by a street sweeper, they're like going like 5 kilometers an hour or something.
It's probably your fault if you got hit by a street sweeper,
So if you have a bunch of these, like you're selling this to cities, then you get a bunch of training data and you get to refine your self-driving algorithms. And then eventually with all of this, you get to upgrade into robo-taxis. But I think like most startups shouldn't tackle robo-taxis directly because, it's like, how are you going to fight against Google for raw AI talent and machine learning? But if you find a profitable path, then you can beat Google not at raw resources, but with like learnings from actually getting things shipped.
Right.
So I thought that was really cool.
That's awesome. And last question here, one of our controversial questions that we usually ask our guests is, do you like pineapples on your pizza? Yes or no?
No strong opinion. Whatever's cheap.
Love it.
Guess that works. Founder mentality. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So yeah, that kind of finishes up the podcast, Colin. One thing that we always like to do is, where can our listeners find LayerCI? And, do you have any interesting roles that are open so our listeners who are, listening can maybe shoot out and apply? Yeah.
So it's layerci.com, LAYERCI.com. Might not mean much to your listeners if they're not developers or working with developers, but it doesn't hurt to take a look. And hiring wise, we're always hiring software developers, and we currently have a job posting open for a salesperson, business development representative. Sweet. Those are both on our careers page.
Sweet.
If you go to layerci.com/careers.
Sweet.